The idea of tuning cars has greatly been growing in popularity, especially with the import performance crowd. They use four-cylinder motors and add various tuning things to gain horsepower and make them race-worthy. One thing that most people really don't realize is that some V8 motors will fit in the engine bays of cars such as 240SXs. The motor that I'm trying to convince you to be able to swap into your vehicle is the Chevrolet LS2 6-liter V8 motor that comes stock in a Chevrolet Corvette and a Pontiac GTO. It's a lightweight motor with a all-aluminum block, aluminum heads, and produces about 400 horsepower off the line. The motor that comes stock in 240SX is a KA 2.4-liter motor that has a cast iron block and a max horsepower of about 160. The advantages of having a KA motor is, of course, gas mileage. You get about 24 miles to the gallon, although with an increase of performance upgrades, that gas mileage will decrease. They are a powerhouse of a motor. They produce a large amount of torque for the size of the motor. That's why they're used in Nissan Frontiers, small trucks, and as well as Altimas. Some of the advantages of the LS2 motor is, of course, the lightweight. It's actually 187 pounds lighter than the 2.4-liter motor, even though it's more than twice the size. The power-to-weight ratio is one of the best ever made. It's at nearly 300 pounds. It puts out 400 horsepower. Again, the cast aluminum block, along with advances in technology, have allowed it to gain much horsepower. The block can hold up to 600 horsepower stock without any modifications to it. Despite the size of the motor, it will actually sit in the engine bay of 2.4-liter further back than the stock motor, which will increase the center of gravity, thus increasing the amount of handling the car is capable of. The price for doing the swap is a little pricey. You can find the motor for about $5,000. That includes transmission, ECU, wiring harness, and all other things needed. But you would also have to buy the conversion kit, which includes custom motor mounts, transmission mounts, and custom drive shaft, which you can pick up for about $1,000. Now, for a little over $6,000, if you're doing the work yourself, that's not too bad for a 400 horsepower car and a 2,400 pound automobile. To build a KA 2.4-liter to have close to the amount of horsepower will end up running you a lot more. The bottom end will have to be built with forged rods, pistons. The head will have to be built with aftermarket studs and cams, and you'll eventually have to put a turbo kit on it to get that power increase. With that, you're looking at upwards of $6,000 to $8,000. So the price difference for the V8 LS2 is actually better than building the KA by itself. Some of the economical advantages of having the KA is, of course, the gas mileage, and as well as low emissions control. We live in an area where emissions are strictly enforced by the Georgia Clean Air Force Act. I myself, as an emissions inspector, know the importance of having to have emissions and the laws and regulations required by it. After building one of these 2.4-liter motors, sometimes it's quite hard to pass emissions because of the massive amount of fuel that is needed to put into the turbo along with the air. It will end up running richer and creating more toxins that are let into the ozone. The LS2 motor is a cleaner motor. It runs better. It's a newer motor, so the technological advances along with the emission standards kept in mind while building it and coming up with the idea of the motor has helped it to be more emissions friendly, even though it has such a high horsepower rating. However, when most racers think of a high horsepower motor, you don't want restrictions such as a catalytic converter, which will take away from the airflow and reduce horsepower. One thing about these motors are, for emissions control, if you put an LS2 into a 240SX, you are considered under the hot rod clause, which means you are void of any emissions testing because it is a motor that did not come stock in that vehicle. As well as that, by the time you're done with building a KA motor, your fuel economy will drop drastically. However, the LS2 will still remain at an average of 22 miles per gallon with a 400 horsepower car. In conclusion to that, the LS2 is a far superior motor to put into an import such as a 240SX because of its very high horsepower, lightweight, and better center of gravity once installed, which will help with handling and overall performance of the vehicle.